And we're joined now by TSN Hockey Insider, one half of the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast. It is our friend. Happy New Year to Mr. Darren Dreger.
Hey guys, Happy New Year. I guess, we're doing this on Tuesday, January 6th. When does the statute of limitations kick in on saying Happy New Year?
The rest of the week.
Like it's, yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
I'm good with that.
I believe we're already late in the Larry David curmudgeon world.
But this is the first business week post
That's right.
holidays.
Exactly.
So I think you say it all week.
I am greeting all of our guests this week with a Happy New Year, right up and through Friday. So take that, Larry.
I'm good with that. I'm all good with that. That's fine.
Now, Darren, as many know, grew up in rural Saskatchewan, and in fact, his parents owned a bar in the rural Saskatchewan, and there was a post yesterday on social media showing the place, and it hasn't changed much from, back in the 70s, I guess, Darren, when your family was there. But, of course, these little towns on the prairies, Darren, they used to develop fantastic hockey players. Bobby Clark from Flin Flon, Manitoba, Gordie Howe from Floral, Saskatchewan, on and on it went. And here's the thing. They could just be really great in their minor hockey associations, and they would keep getting the attention of more and more hockey people. Oh, this guy's good. He should play this level. He should play this level. And onwards and upwards it went. Hey, Trevor Linden, growing up on a farm in Medicine Hat, Alberta. Mm-hmm. We're asking on our poll question today, Dregs, are you worried about the state of Canadian hockey in the realm of the World Junior team now going 3 years without a gold medal? But if you go a little deeper onto the grassroots, holy cow, is it expensive to stake a young kid on a potential professional
And Darren's
hockey
a great guy to ask because you've had a son play at a very high level. You've gone through sort of the modern framework. So you can sort of speak to it both ways. Let us know.
So I remember Ken Campbell, and this is going back probably 15 years ago. He wrote a book talking about the expense of minor hockey. And, I'm not quoting, the chapter or whatever, but I remember him referencing, would you believe that there are some families that pay as much as $20,000 for their sons or daughters to play high level hockey? And I reached out to him. I'm like, Kenny, you're not even close. Yeah. You're not even close. And, that would probably be, again, 10 years ago. And my son at the time was probably playing minor bantam, maybe Pee-wee AAA. And at least in Eastern Canada, when you're playing Pee-wee AAA, well, the crown jewel is the Quebec Pee-wee International Hockey Tournament. And if you're fortunate enough as a team to qualify to get into that, well, it's just incredible. But it comes with incredible expense. I mean, you're there for 10, 12, almost 2 weeks, So that's on top of the dues, and that's on top of the price of equipment, and that's on top of, when my guy was in his heyday, and I mean, he was drafted by the Sioux Greyhounds in the Ontario Hockey League in a late round. It's not like he was destined to be an NHL player. He wasn't. But I remember in Bantam, and certainly his minor midget year, but at least Bantam, maybe Pee-wee. So you pay your dues, you've got your equipment costs. At one point, he was taking private skating lessons with Barb Underhill. And he had an additional skills coach on top of that, right? So we were shelling out in the neighborhood of probably $250 a week in additional coaching on top of everything that you do back then. So I read it, and look, I mean, anybody listening to this is, well, that's on you as a parent. Why do you have to pay that? You don't, when 1% of minor hockey players actually find their way to the National Hockey League, something along those lines. But you're in it, right? And I was that dad who wanted to give my son, my kids, every opportunity to succeed. Didn't push them to be NHL players. I just said, okay, here are the resources. So that's probably why the registrations for Hockey Canada, I mean, we've all seen the data, the numbers are diving and all of that. It has to be connected, not just the sole factor, but in a big way connected to the investment required.
Do you think that there is there's two different issues here? One is Canada has not been great at the World Juniors. One is dwindling Canadian ice hockey registration,
especially boys.
Yes,
boys.
Are they connected? Those two issues, because I have no doubt. There's a Topher Scott tweet that's going crazy right now, and I don't dispute what he says in it. I think it is an issue. The cost, most certainly, and there's a million different options now. Soccer's burgeoning. It's stealing some players, perhaps. All that sort of stuff. But is that tied to the World Junior issue?
It isn't for me. It isn't. Yep. And, maybe we just give credit to Sweden, to Czechia, to Finland, who always ices a very, very competitive team. And these countries who have found a way to play a North American style and found a way to morph their high-level skill into that style. And, anybody who watched the medal round of the World Junior Championship could see that. Czechia had more bite. They were harder on the forecheck. They defended better than Canada, and their skill ultimately prevailed. Now, is that an indictment on where Canada is as a developing hockey nation? I don't think it is. I don't. You look at the Edmonton Oilers in the Stanley Cup final in the last couple of years. Did they have the skill to win the Cup? Of course they did. They went to Game 7 last year. Probably, if you boil it down, it was the commitment and the attention and detail and all the cliche stuff that, the depth of the Florida Panthers that prevails. All right, so I have time for us to question the style that Canada played. And I'm not being critical of the coaching staff. I think that they put the highest skilled team together that they had access to, right? Now, you can coach these kids and say, all right, you're a bottom six forward. Here's how we need you to play. You're a penalty killer. Here's how we need you to play. You're not a defensive forward in any of your respective leagues, but we need you to be that here. Well, the way that these kids have developed now in the last decade especially, I don't think they're wired for that. Doesn't mean that they just throw it out the window and say, no, I'm not interested in winning. Of course they are. They might feel like they're playing defensive, but by the standard that they play in their respective league where they're achieving high success, maybe they're not. So I think it boils down to more of a commitment and a style than it does to the path that Canada is on. And it's not our God-given right in this country to put the gold medal around our neck at every event that we strap into. That's just not the case anymore, globally speaking.
No, look, the cost is a big thing, and even our buddy Farhan Lalji was tweeting about that last night. We've known his son Luke for his whole life, and he talked about how when his son wanted to prioritize football, he said great, because he knew eventually he would have to tap out financially in terms of financing the hockey journey. The other thing that I think plays into this, Dregs, in terms of kids playing hockey, there is far less outdoor hockey. And this was always a big Canadian advantage as well. You could play for free for hours on end at outdoor rinks. 15 years ago, I was doing a story back in my newspaper days on Andrew Ference, the NHL defenseman who was really pushing environmental advocacy through the ranks of the NHL, and spoke to David Suzuki, who said, it'd be impossible these days for Walter to build Wayne, that famed backyard rink, because it doesn't get cold enough in Brantford, Ontario through the winters to be able to sustain ice. Growing up in Ottawa, Dregs, it was never a question if the Rideau Canal was going to be skatable in January and February. Of course it was. People tell me they used to skate here at Vancouver's Lost Lagoon, which is just absolutely mind-blowing, unthinkable to me. So one of our great advantages of being able to get out there and just play for free, too, is being taken away from us coast to when you're unable to skate on like huge pads like the Rideau Canal and Lost Lagoon, as previous generations of Canadians did, you're taking a lot of people out of the skating game.
No, I get that, and the costs attached to that are ultimately incurred by the families. I don't know what it costs now for an hour of ice in Southern Ontario in the GTA. I'm going to guess it's anywhere between $350 to $500 an hour. Yep. That's what it is.
Is that what it is here, Blake?
Yep. Yeah. So to your point, if you don't have the resources as a team to cover that, what are your kids left with? There's no free skating anywhere. And look, I don't want to dive into a whole hockey conversation about this, but I always know, like, we had a backyard rink for most of my son's developmental years, from 4 years old till 15, 16 years of age. And it was funny to me. I mean, it wasn't funny. It was legit. When the backyard rink came into play, so, I mean, literally it was cold enough, to your point, Matt, where you could go out there normally late December, mid to late December. His game went through the roof. Hey, he'd be scoring goals. He'd be doing things that you didn't see in the first 15, 20 games of the year. Yep. And I once asked him, I'm like, why do you think that is? Aside from the obvious, I mean, you're touching the puck, you're doing things around the net that you wouldn't do in a practice or might not do in a game. And he just said, because I'm able to do what I want to do. I'm just out here having fun. That's all I'm doing. I'm shooting the puck the way I want to shoot the puck. I'm doing things like the Michigan that would just never be acceptable in AAA hockey. But just look, one more thought on all this. Here's what bugs me about it. We in the media always grab the low-hanging fruit. We do, and we're all guilty of it, right? So I'm somewhat amused by just the flow of people who otherwise don't comment on the cost of playing minor hockey or the issues around the development of these young hockey players, unless they feel that there's a reason to comment on it. I don't think winning a bronze medal for Canada is reason for people who never talk about the cost of minor hockey in Canada to dive on Hockey Canada and dive on, associations across this country, because they wouldn't do it otherwise. Let's get into the cost of some of these other sports. I mean, dance. You want to talk about dance and how much it costs? I mean, figure skating. I mean, come on. It's because hockey draws the eyeballs and gets the clicks. That's why.
You can make the argument about
there are a lot of sports that are expensive.
The
World Juniors does tend to serve as a catalyst for these sorts of discussions.
But unfairly so.
We all do it. Fairly so, yes.
Once a year, is it not healthy to take a look at our national sport and how it's doing? Like, I'm A-okay with that. And if the World Juniors serves as a convenient barometer for a lot of people, then so be it.
But why do you think Brendan Shanahan was just brought on in the new role that he has with Hockey Canada? It's not to clean up junior hockey or change anything. He was brought in to review some of the areas of concern. And I will tell you this because I've lived it, and I know that it's one of the primary areas of concern. It's not major junior hockey. Major junior hockey gets an unfair rap for how they treat these kids. And, everybody assumes that these kids are sitting in their basement playing video games when they're not on the ice practicing or playing games. That's not the way it is anymore. They take mandatory courses. They've got a mandatory education that they have to adhere to. Otherwise, you have no shot at the NCAA. I mean, that's pretty obvious. Shanahan was brought in to look at the lower tiers, to review what's going on in the BC Junior League isn't under the umbrella of Hockey Canada anymore.
But stuff like that.
I look at all those that are, including the Ontario Junior Hockey League. And when my guy was coming up to there, would you believe there were families paying over $10,000 a year for their kid to be aligned with that OJHL team. In certain situations, that kid never hit the ice. He didn't play. But his family thought, oh, it's cool that he's got that uniform. And he gets to practice for $10,000 a year. So those are the areas that Shanahan has been brought in to review and offer some suggestions if needed.
Let me ask you one last question on this, because following up on your talk about the coaching of the players at the World Juniors. And I'm hoping the answer is not yes, but do we have to stop this pendulum of skill that we started? Like, we kind of copied Europe a little bit and said, started to say, hey, try the Michigan, do the creative stuff, be offensive. Is somebody going to say the pendulum has now swung too far in that regard and we're going to have to get back to meat and potatoes? Is that going to be a reaction to this?
I think in certain arenas of hockey, that'll be and I've heard that. I mean, again, I've mentioned this a couple of times today. and I don't want to name the name because I tend to agree with this person, former player. I just can't remember who it was. And his response was after the Czechia win in the semifinal that they out-Canada'd Canada in terms of everything that we've talked about, the forecheck and all of those things. Maybe there's something to that, Blake. Maybe there is. But look, I mean, Billy Guerin and to a degree Doug Armstrong have been openly criticized for the main rosters that they presented for the Olympics. Mm-hmm. And they didn't pick all-star teams. As Billy Guerin said, you don't need general managers to pick the team that some media and most fans want. You know, you have to put the pieces of a puzzle together, and you're doing that because you expect to meet Canada in the medal round, or Sweden, or Finland, or Czechia. These are top teams. So you'd better be well-rounded and have all of your bases covered defensively on top of all of it to make sure that you're prepared. So, yeah, maybe that's the new approach for Team Canada on the World Junior front.
All right, let's move on to the Vancouver Canucks. Kiefer Sherwood, Dregs, is there a new approach here? Is there any chance of an actual contract extension here? And what are you hearing on the trade market and his price?
It's a weird market, to be fair, and it's not a quiet market. I don't want people to misunderstand. But Vancouver, as we know, made their big splash sending Quinn Hughes to the Minnesota Wild. So I think because, again, of how tight it is across the NHL and the need for, secondary scoring across the National Hockey League, that it's wise, the position that Patrick Allvin is taking here and just saying, okay, well, when the deal is right that is offered to us for Kiefer Sherwood, we will know. We will make that deal. What is it? Is it a first-round draft pick? Is it a prospect in a second? I don't know what the dynamic of that perfect equation is. But in the meantime, I think just doing your due diligence, you continue to keep the dialogue open with Judd Moldaver, who represents Kiefer Sherwood, and find out whether there is a sweet spot. The one thing that I think would maybe stand in the way of the Canucks extending Sherwood is Kiefer Sherwood deserves to get paid. And maybe overpaid based on where he's at in his career. Is Vancouver willing to do that? He's probably not. Probably not. No. Based on the direction they're going. They should be in a position where they want to squeeze every drop of juice via trade that they can get to make their team better for the future. And, maybe there is a perfect fit for Kiefer Sherwood on the trade front whereby, he goes as a rental, signs and extends, or he goes as a rental, and then he's wide open to the pool that will be available in free agency. But there are two guys within the Canucks that I wouldn't say they're drawing a ton of interest. People are paying attention to, and obviously Sherwood is one, and Evander Kane is the other one. But with all due respect to Evander, he's got the naysayers, and he's got some the detractors that kind of seem to follow him fairly or unfairly. So it feels like he might be one that happens closer to the deadline, if at all.
Let me ask you this one. I'm surprising you with this one. It can be a short answer.
Uh-huh.
Is the probability of an Elias Pettersson trade 0 or non-zero?
A short answer, I'd say non-zero. And I that's not trying to drive a headline.
No, we know it's just low. Yeah.
It's low, but guys, I mean, when you trade away a piece like Quinn Hughes, and we don't have to go down that whole long list of reasons why they did it. The most obvious is they knew that Quinn wasn't going to extend there, but you still traded a world-class piece. So how can you absolutely close the door on any possibility moving forward? I just don't think you can. Now, it's the return has to be exactly what you need, whatever that looks like. But let's say a team like Carolina or another team circles back because they like what they've seen from Elias Pettersson this year and they're willing to re-engage. I mean, you're not doing your job as general manager if you just say, nope, not available. Vancouver can't afford to do that, I don't think.
We're hearing smoke out of Edmonton about Jake DeBrusk coming home, that the Oilers might be a landing spot if DeBrusk was willing to wave and go home. Picking up anything there? Is there a realm of possibility where Jake DeBrusk goes back and has dad call his games?
Yeah, well, every day there seems to be a rumor around the Edmonton Oilers. So it's Jake DeBrusk, and the other day it was Boone Jenner from the Columbus Blue Jackets. I mean, how is this happening? Like, where is Stan Bowman getting all the room to make these wonderful deals? And
That's it.
What assets is he using to make these deals? So I'm not here to dispel rumor. I'm occasionally amused by it, but then common sense kicks in. Okay, well, maybe. But I mean, because of the situation with DeBrusk and the Vancouver Canucks, I have poked around a little bit. Not Vancouver, to be fair, not sourcing out of Vancouver, more the interest from other teams that could or would be there. And yeah, I mean, a player of his significance definitely has an audience. There's no doubt about that. But there's been some criticism that follows along with that possibility as well. And, Jake is a streaky player, always has been, right? And the problem that some managers and coaches have with that is, okay, given his size and given where he's at and given his contract above all else, you can't do that. Like, if you're a non-productive player offensively, that's one thing. But he's got other attributes that he could use to be a more well-rounded player that the critics of his game don't see enough of. And so I think there'd be a market for him. I think Vancouver would like to move him. He does have the trade protection, but it's maybe not as cut and dried as some would think.
All righty, sir. Well, we'll let you get upon your day. That is Darren Dreger from McNutt, Saskatchewan, Blake. That is northeast of Esterhazy by the Manitoba border.
Everybody should have a visual
Northwest
now.
of Inglis,
Manitoba. Oh, you're picking big landmarks here.
These are the biggest ones around.
Two great hamlets, Inglis, Manitoba, and McNutt, Saskatchewan. I once terrorized senior hockey. I think it was 14 when I made my debut with the McNutt Kings on natural ice, fellas.
Oh, yes.
We started the conversation there, and that's where we ended.
My home rink in Winnipeg was a natural ice outdoor rink.
There you go. Played outdoor league games in his minor hockey association. Thanks, Dregs.
Thanks, guys.